all very they're all very connected.
I would add that I think that mentorship has a more personal element to it, because for consulting, especially when you talk to an attorney about consulting, we have consultations all the time with clients. And that's when someone that we have never met before, comes to us, and we ask them questions to ascertain whether we can provide any sort of legal, assistance to them. And that's not very personal at all. It's pretty much just getting the facts. Whereas mentorship, at least for me and the attorneys that I've worked with as I've been helping them develop as attorneys, is much more personal. And I think it's really based on an element of trust and also connection, finding commonalities between you and the person that you're working with.
And I personally agree with everything that everyone has said thus far. And I definitely resonate with everything that everyone has said. I would also add that, at least for me, in my experiences, coaching and mentorship has been more of like a one-on-one type of relationship, where some of my consulting type of relationships have been more group-based. So that's just something to also consider when you're thinking about the 3 points there as well.
Thank you all so much for that. And so it sounds like coaching, mentorship, and consulting all have sort of a very similar purpose of guidance and uplift on the individual, but they tend to take place in different circumstances and in different settings. And so with that, we're going to move on. I have another question for you all, which is, how have mentorship, coaching, and consulting played a role in your own career development, and what impact have they had on your leadership journey? And we'll start out with Ms. Brown.
For me, I think I've had to look into like external consulting for my own professional and personal development, which has been really nice, because I've been able to like diversify my own experiences by looking externally for that consulting. And in terms of mentorship and coaching, I've reached more internal into like my organization and like different roles, whether I'm looking at like peers or other like leadership as well. So definitely like reaching outward and inward as well, to have like a diverse experience in my own personal experiences.
All right, amazing. Thank you so much. Is there anyone else who wanted to add or expound to Ms. Brown's answer before we move forward?
Yeah, I mean, I would add one kind of my experience. I mean, it's very similar to Maya, to Ms. Brown's, but I would say mentorship and coaching has played a very critical role in my career development. Had it not been for me having some very strong mentors and those that kind of took me under their wing very early on in my career, and taking really a vested interest in me, I probably would not be where I am today. It really allowed me, again, the opportunity to connect, to build those relationships. And it's more than about networking. Like, I think sometimes there's a little bit of a negative connotation around like the networking aspect of it. It's really not about that. It's about building those connections, the relationships, and making it personal. And that person knowing you so well, and you knowing that person so well, that again, you've got that level of candor, and they're able to really guide you in an appropriate way, in a very custom and personalized way, based on what they know about you, but also based on what their experiences have been. The beauty also, I think, of mentorship is that it can turn into something bigger, right? And we didn't really mention this, but I think there are two other aspects of development that we should touch on, and that's advocacy and sponsorship. So a mentor can easily turn into an advocate for you or a sponsor for you. And that is huge in corporate America, and your ability to move up within the organization. Someone who is an advocate and who is a sponsor has the political capital and has a voice at the table, and is willing to leverage and use that political capital to speak on your behalf for promotions, new opportunities, new assignments, et cetera, and they can get you the visibility. that you may be looking for. So I have personally been able to benefit from that, and I look now to make sure that I am reaching back, right, and offering that same thing to others.
Thank you so much for that, Ms. Hunter. Not only are mentorship and coaching huge, but like you mentioned, advocacy and sponsorship are really hugely important in corporate America. Mr. Belcher, did you have something to add?
Yeah, sure. I think this question also goes into the next question you're going to ask, and I think that really comes down to perspective. I think mentorship for me specifically has got me outside of my comfort zone. I think that's what mentorship is supposed to do, especially if you're trying to move up. You need to be able to have a broader perspective in order to be in some of those roles. And I think when you choose a mentor and listen to the others speak upon the relationship you build with that mentor, they should be able to challenge that. And for me specifically, that has definitely helped me out, get me outside my own comfort zone, but also broadening my perspective as well.
And I'll add that, at least for attorneys, it can actually be rather difficult to have a mentor because, at least for me, when I first started out, everyone's so busy with their schedules and going to court and everything that they don't necessarily even want to take the time to really be a mentor. And for me, it actually wasn't that difficult because I'm more of an, independent learner. So I managed to learn fine. But I saw as I was, advancing my career that newer attorneys who are starting out, after me, I thought that they could benefit from that guidance because when you don't have a mentor, it's really difficult. There's a lot of trial and error, and your license is also on the line. So I helped to actually create within my firm a mentorship program for newer attorneys, whether they are new graduates or whether they have transferred over from a different area of law, and I've been working with them to teach them the basics of immigration law and also how to actually be an attorney, because law school teaches you the law, but it teaches you how to think like an attorney, but not really how to practice as one. So I think it highlights the importance of really having a mentor, because if not, it can be very difficult.
Thank you so much for that, Ms. Corbin and Mr. Belcher, as well as everyone who spoke prior to them. So I'll talk a lot about mentorship so far, how mentorship has personally impacted you, what you've done to mentor the people in your field who have come up before you. And so considering the diverse age groups in today's workplace, we have a lot of people in older generations who will soon be retiring. We have a lot of young people entering the workforce as well. How can mentorship, coaching, and consulting help bridge that generational gap and facilitate effective collaboration with team members? And we can start with Ms. Hunter.
So I think it's a very interesting question, and your point is spot on. There's so many variations of diversity, right? Like obviously there's race and ethnicity and gender and so on, but I love the question being focused on the diversity in age, and I think we see that more and more, right, in the workplace. As we continue to focus on diversity. In terms of the coaching and the mentoring, I think it's important for you to have a diverse, what I call like board of directors. So, as someone, coming into the corporate world, or even if you've been in the corporate environment for, many, many years, I think it's important for you to assess really the mentors and the coaches that you have and those relationships and connections that you have, and really determine like where do they fall, right, from kind of like a demographic perspective. Do you have strong representation across genders? Do you have representation from obviously from Black leaders, but do you have representation from others, right, as well? Do you have representation in terms of your mentors that cross the different age groups also? And are you seeking out, if you are a mentor, are you seeking out mentees that are also representative, right, of those various demographics? I think that's where, when you are diverse in the way that you approach kind of your strategy to being a mentor and being a mentee, when you approach who your board of directors are and you ensure that that board is very diverse, that's when you see the collaboration. That's when you see all of these great ideas coming together, because you're hearing so many different perspectives, and you're hearing so many different life experiences that are being shared. So I think it's a huge opportunity to make sure that we do that.
And I really appreciate your point, Ms. Hunter, because when it comes to the law, it's been said that the law is the last bastion of racism. And unfortunately, there's even today still not a lot of lawyers who look like us. And I've been fortunate in that in the immigration field, because it tends to deal with the different cultures and languages, that you do tend to see more attorneys of, you know, all different types of races, speaking different languages. And when I have been working with the lawyers at newer lawyers at my firm, I've actually been working more so with plenty of women. There are a lot of women attorneys, and not as many African American women, but I have been working with more like Latina women, also Latino men, and we've also got Caribbean people as well. So I agree that having more representation from people who look like the people that are being mentored would really help in terms of establishing that personal connection.
Yeah, I would say specifically to the question about diverse age groups, I think it's invaluable, right? I mean, coming to any workplace, even from a college perspective, a college campus, I mean, the wealth of knowledge lies in the older generations, right? So if you're having a team filled with people who've done this for years, I mean, the wealth of knowledge that a transfer that can happen is, I think, is needed for business to continue, but also for any business to continue at that matter. I try for my own personal mentors. Um, all my mentors are over 45, 50 years old, right? I really can't I really haven't come across too many people around my age that can add a perspective in my life that I don't have, or add the value I need in order to continue my career in any area I want to move into. So I would definitely say, for someone looking for a mentor, my own personal experience is looking for someone of the older generation. I mean, just think about when you go to family reunions or something, right? All that knowledge sitting at that grandparent, aunt, uncle table. You just gotta soak it up.
And to add on to what everyone has said, I want to share like experiences from like two of my own like different backgrounds, like being a classroom teacher and also being a recruiter now. When I joined the classroom, I was, really novice into the profession, and I leaned a lot on mentors and veteran teachers who have been there for a long time. And I feel like for my first couple of years getting my feet wet in the profession, those mentorships and those relationships were absolutely monumental to me in my success in the classroom. However, we hit a pandemic. And a lot of like those relationships kind of like switched over when education became more technology focused, where like some of those same mentors were reaching out to me and asking for support and, teaching on a laptop pretty much, or teaching virtually. So definitely like that give and take, that push and pull for those mentorship relationships within the diverse age groups. And then I will say now in recruitment, I'm personally recruiting like a lot of like college, like seniors and juniors, and even undergraduate students as well, which are like, Gen Z and millennial focused. And again, like those are a lot of students who were hit during the pandemic. So we were missing a lot of those like networking skills and professionalism and like socializing and what that means in the workforce. So I'm always telling my folks like, hey, maybe you should reach out to somebody who's a little bit like into the profession that you are trying to get into, like really trying to lean into like other folks who have those experiences, and seeing what they have to offer in their mentorship. Like, do you have an advisor? Like those are the questions that I'm like always asking my students. So I think that diverse age group relationships and mentorships are very monumental in all different types of forms.
Thank you all so much. And now I have another question, which isn't explicitly on the sheet of questions we gave you, it's sort of implied. I feel like it's come up in the conversation. We're talking about finding mentors, a little about how students should maybe go about it. But how did you all find your mentors? What was that like for you? What skills did you use? And how do you recommend that young people hone those skills so they can continue to find mentors and coaches as they enter into their respective fields? And we can start with Ms. Brown or Ms. Hunter.
Well, I went to Rutgers, which is a predominantly white institution. My major was Africana Studies, though, however. So I was already a little bit like apprehensive going into Rutgers, like I'm a Black woman, coming into this white institution, and like I want to be able to find mentors that not only like look like me and have like some of the same like affinity markers, but who actually want to be my mentor, and I don't feel like I'm begging them or bothering them with my questions or the things that I was looking out for. So honestly, I looked into like the circles that I was already in. Like I looked into like who are the assigned advisors for my major or for my grade level or so on and so forth there, or looking just into like different folks or different professors who actually took a liking into like my success on campus as well. So that was definitely something that I did in like the higher education realm. And then I've been working since I've been 15. So having all my relationships being longing relationships as well, like I definitely believe in like you don't burn bridges. And a lot of my current mentors are like supervisors that I had when I was a teenager or like early college. Because they were where I wanted to be then, and they were able to see me kind of like grow up and have different forms of my life. So I can really lean into them, excuse me, like being really honest and candid, kind of like what Miss Hunter was talking about earlier. So definitely just looking into like the people who are already adjacent into the things that I'm already doing.
Thank you. And then before we go to Ms. Hunter, how did you maintain those long-lasting relationships from your early workforce experience going all the way to where you are now? I think that's something a lot of young people might be missing, especially because COVID sort of automatically burned some bridges as we were coming up through our secondary education.
For me, I try to lean into just being as genuine as possible. I feel like, yes, you have like professional relationships and such, but I still like care about all the people that I do have professional relationships with. So being able to check in and saying like, hey, like, how are your kids doing? Or like, how's your mom doing? And I know these are things that like we've talked about in our like conversations or our meetings, and just being able to lean into like who they are as a human being. And I think naturally and organically, those relationships kind of like stayed afloat. But I will also say like responding to messages, like again, like as a recruiter, I feel like a lot of people like miss out on just emails and text messages and phone calls, and they may not reach out for whatever reason. We all get really busy. I know myself included. My phone is always on do not disturb, but I always make sure I reach back out. I just don't leave people hanging, because I feel like that's how a lot of relationships start to like go dry. Like I don't believe in like ghosting people. I feel like this is definitely like a ghosting type of time that we're in. So definitely really leaning into just keeping conversation going as much as possible. And it doesn't have to be hour-long conversations. It can be just a quick, hey, you were on my mind. How are you doing? Every couple of weeks.
Yeah, I love everything that Miss Brown said, and I would say for me it's very very similar. I think your relationships, connections that you have, mentor, mentee, coach, advocate, champion, whatever it may be, everything has to be organic, right? It cannot be forced, and a lot of it is very much. It starts at least in those that are in close proximity to you. So for me, I was lucky enough or blessed enough to have some really strong leaders around me. And I actually had a leader that looked like me, which was very unusual at the time when I was joining like 25 years ago. Like that was not something that was common in the IT space. And so, definitely took advantage of that. but then it's also important for you to be intentional and have a strategy around like how do you identify a mentor, and that it can be by getting involved in different organizations and groups within your field, your industry, your corporation. I know at Vanguard we have what we call employee resource groups, and so there's an opportunity, and these groups are based on kind of like affinity. So there's one for our Black crew, right, bold, and so you have a huge opportunity as a result of engaging in those types of organizations to meet leaders at all levels. And I think when you naturally kind of find that connection and organically kind of line up and match up with someone, I don't think that there's anything wrong with actually reaching out and, beginning to have a conversation. And it can start with just a simple chat of, hey, like, Ms. Brown said, you were on my mind. I know we met the other day, at ABC event. I really appreciated our conversation. Thanks for taking the time. But you can use that as a building block that, again, for me, I found eventually turned into mentors and, advocates and sponsors and so on. So I think it's twofold. I think it's the organic nature of like the relationships that you're just going to have from your leaders. I think it's also you can ask for a mentor as well. Like, I think that's something that people don't often do, but I think it's taking advantage of like the engagement that you have on a larger scale and kind of putting yourself out there sometimes and being comfortable with, starting those relationships, starting those conversations. And it's okay if someone says no, right? Like, I think that's sometimes what we worry about is the rejection, or we worry about them being busy. They will tell you, but I will say, and I'm speaking as someone again who loves to mentor. I've had a number of people who have reached out to me over the years, and I always try my best to be upfront about my capacity, and I always try my best to give to them as much as possible. So you'd be surprised, like you may think that person may not have capacity, or you may think they're super busy, but their passion may be in that space, and it could be a yes for you. So sometimes you have to kind of take that leap of faith as well to begin to step out and be more intentional in how you approach and build up your mentor network.
Thank you so much for that, Ms. Brown and Ms. Hunter. I know, Mr. Belcher, you have to drop off, so I just wanted to thank Mr. Belcher for his time really quickly as he just left for another obligation. Ms. Corbin, do you have anything to add before we circle back to our last two questions of the day?
Yes, I would just mention that you shouldn't be afraid to ask questions, and in fact, you can just see who is actually receptive to the questions that you may have. Because since it was harder for me to find a mentor when I was starting out because the attorneys were so busy, one of the things that I did was try to be the mentor to the new graduates that I've been working with that I wish that I had. And one of the things that the attorneys have mentioned to me is that they appreciate how receptive I am, that I'm not necessarily judgmental of them if they ask me a question, and that I'm readily available for the questions that they may have. And I think that helps to create an environment of trust. So you'll want to make sure that the person that you're reaching out to, that they're not impatient with you for asking a question, that they don't make you feel stupid for asking a question, because the whole point is that, especially if you're learning, is that you're learning. So you shouldn't feel afraid to ask. And again, it's making sure that you feel that, as others have mentioned, that organic relationship, which I think is founded in trust and their receptiveness to the questions that you may have.
Thank you so much for that. And then circling back to our final, I believe it's our final question of the day before we open up to audience questions. Today, we've talked about mentorship, coaching, and consulting, all three of them. And so our final question is, how do all three of those elements, mentorship, coaching, and consulting, contribute to developing strong leadership skills and what qualities should our students be looking for in a mentor, coach, or consultant? I know we talked a little bit about that in how to find a mentor, but I think this is still an important question to touch on. I think you all have something really, really valuable to share about this. So whoever would like to go first, please speak up.
I'll kick us off here. I would say if you are seeking out mentoring, consulting, coaching, that means that you are trying to lean into your own professional and personal development. So I think that number one is already just showing like initiative within leadership skills. And also with that, I think you have to also identify what type of skills or what you are trying to like gain or fine tune or develop throughout your relationship with that mentor, with that coach, with that consultant. So again, like I think identifying your own needs of growth or areas of growth, I think really definitely shows leadership experience and leadership skills. And in terms of what qualities, I would say like trying to find somebody who practices what they preach. There's like a lot of people out there who have a lot of great things to say, but if they're not doing that within their own professional practices, it's going to be kind of hard to like take what they're saying as like full value. So I would definitely say like make sure that you're doing your own research on that person as well to make sure that they are like a legitimate source for yourself, to make sure that you're actually going into the right direction, following their feedback.
Yeah, I love that, you know, Ms. Brown, what you said, and I guess I'll just piggyback. I mean, I agree. I think it plays such a critical role in your leadership development. I think having exposure to others and their experiences and their best practices and what they've been through, one allows you to be able to gain, right, and learn from others. But I think it also helps you to self-reflect in some ways as well. And to Miss Brown's point, like really understanding who you are, right? Like, do you have a good sense of what your purpose is, right? Like, what's really driving you? Do you have a good sense of where you want to go and like what your path looks like? And I think having that well defined and then leveraging that to have more intentional and more targeted conversations with your mentors will help you find the discussions and the conversations to be more productive and help you to kind of see your path more so, right, in terms of where you want to go. So I think it's extremely, you know, again, important to make sure that you are intentional in your approach to mentorship. I think it's important for you to be intentional around your purpose. And I will share one quick thing. This is something that I did not always know. Like, you know, there was no book, you know, coming like straight out of college and coming into like corporate America about like, you know, what you should do or how to go about it and mentorship and so on. And honestly, it was probably only maybe 15 years ago or 20 years ago where I started to really understand the importance of having that sense of purpose and, you know, really kind of defining where you want to go and having those goals and having that sense and understanding and embracing that will help you overall to be a better leader. And again, be more targeted in the conversations that you're having with your mentors or with your advocates and with your sponsors.
And I'll also add that, you know, we've talked about like relationships over time, and I think it's important to keep in mind that things can change and people can evolve. And Ms. Brown talked about making sure that your mentor practices what they preach. And so sometimes things could change, where maybe you need to find a different mentor or a new mentor because maybe the person that you've been, you know, working with, we have to keep in mind they are people, and people go through things and they change, and you know, maybe they're no longer able to help you in the way that they could, or maybe they're no longer really practicing what they preach. And going to Ms. Hunter's point about being intentional, it's important to reflect on yourself and also your relationship with this person. And if perhaps this relationship has changed to the point where it's not sustainable anymore, I don't think you should be afraid to venture out and, you know, form new relationships with other mentors, because that's something that, realistically can happen, as we go through life. So I would just, again, agree with that intentionality, because, you need to do what's best for you and make sure that you are still benefiting from what should be a mutual relationship.
Thank you all so much for that. And I just want to thank you all again for your time, taking time out of your busy workday as the calendar year comes to an end to pour into the young people here at Delaware State. We're now going to open the floor up for questions. Please feel free to unmute yourself to ask a question. If you do unmute yourself, please state your name. And if you don't feel comfortable unmuting yourself, please also feel free to drop your question in the chat so I can read it out for you. We do already have a question. The question is, how do you see leaders make sure that being a leader is constructive rather than just being bossy or demanding?
I can actually speak to that one, because part of my role as an attorney has not just been practicing law, but also managing an office and managing a team of people. And again, I'm not perfect, but I have tried to be the leader that I wanted to have. And I think that something that can really, that leaders should make sure that they're doing is, first of all, communicating. I think consistent communication with your teams helps to give people a vision of where they're going, so that they understand, what the goal is and why they're, coming into work every day to work on something. And even more than that, being out in front. So, normally I'd be the first one to get to the office and the last one to leave. If your team sees that, you're leaving early and they're stuck at the office, for hours later, I think that can really deplete morale. So I would basically say that the leader should be the leader that they would want to have. And I think what can foster respect and a willingness of your team to work with you is when they see that you're working just as hard, if not even harder than they are.
Yeah, I just would add on to that. I think a lot of times we confuse the word leader with manager, right? Like they're two totally different things, right? Like a manager is just kind of like a title and a role, right? A leader, in my mind, is someone very similar to what Ms. Corbin was saying, but a leader is someone who is about others, right? It's not about you, but it's about how you can serve and how you can benefit others. And you put others often before yourself. I know for me, it's very important, again, to have that transparency, to have the trust, to make sure that I'm effectively communicating with my crew, to make sure that they feel like they have a voice and that they have buy-in into the decisions that are being made. If we're developing a strategy, I often look to them and I ask for their opinions. It's about empowerment and autonomy. It's about feeling heard. And if you make someone feel heard, if you make someone feel valued, if you make someone feel like they are a part of the process as opposed to just being told what to do or told what the process is, then you will see a tremendous difference, right, in the effectiveness and the, I don't want to say loyalty, but just the connection of you with the team and the team with you. Like I see myself as a part of the team, not necessarily the leader. Now, there are times, right, where I have to like make a decision, but I always make sure I get that input and I explain to them, hence the communication, why I'm making that decision. So I think it's understanding what leadership really is, and the point about emulating that well, and being a good reflection of that to others is so key. It's not, you're not going to be respected because you have a role. Like that is not how it works. You're respected for how you treat people and the true, authentic, like being genuine and truly caring about your crew, or your we call our employees crew, but your crew, and how you pull them in and make them feel.
I would say, first, like when you are like going through interviews and trying to think about like what your next position is, I think first off, you're also interviewing that person or that company or that manager or that leader, because you also want to understand like what type of leader are they and what type of leader that you want, and are those two things aligned? And I also think that once you are in a position, I personally like to foster working style type of conversations, because it just really helps to understand, like, again, what type of person they are, what type of person I am, and how those working styles may align, or where there may be some differing ideas, but that is okay. But like, how do we work through that, and how do we work together? I will also say like setting strong boundaries for yourself and standing on it. Quote unquote, like standing on business. I think boundaries are very, very important, especially in the workforce, because a lot of times you can either be micromanaged, or you may be working hours that you may not think that you should be working. But at the end of the day, yes, I think it is a privilege to be able to like have certain boundaries within your role or within your manager. Like, I'm not going to deny that, because every situation is very different. But if you are given the opportunity to really hone down on those personal boundaries, definitely standing on them and sticking by them, especially with your leadership or manager, so on and so forth.
Thank you so much for that. We do have one audience comment, and then I'm going to read two audience questions from the same individual. You all can choose to answer either or. First, we have a comment from Janvier, which says, sometimes you may find value in people in passing. The longevity of a mentor in your life can be short-term or long-term. Keep in mind that it's not about how much time a mentor has spent in your life, but how much they have impacted your life personally or professionally during that time. With this in mind, it helps to understand the position and respect the time they invest in you as an individual. And then we actually have 3 audience questions. I'm going to read, and please correct me if I pronounce your name wrong. I'm very sorry if I do. We have 2 questions from Menusonen Hammett, who's majoring in hospitality and tourism management. Their questions were, when you reach out to someone new who you hope should be a mentor, how can you gauge if they're receptive to the idea of helping you? And then their second question, which is personally a question I have as well, is what is a good way to reach out to mentors you're still interested in keeping connections with when a significant amount of time has passed by? Let's say that something has happened, you had an unforeseen circumstance, you've had some significant changes, but you'd still like to circle back because you value this relationship. How would you all go about doing that?
So did you want us to answer like both of those questions or the second one?
Yes, if you could answer one or both, whichever one you all choose to answer is up to you.
Well, honestly, I think the first one kind of goes into the second one a little bit, and I think it's about their energy, really. When I speak to someone, I can feel their energy. I know that sometimes it can be a little difficult to explain in words, but really just goes towards what is their attitude. Like if you ask them a question, are they scowling at you? Are they smiling? Do they seem impatient? Or do they seem like, oh, do they, if they were doing something, like if they're writing, do they put it down and look at you? Or are they just answering your question and they're still typing at their computer, not even looking at you? So I think that goes towards whether they're willing to actually give you their attention or not. And that would go towards their receptiveness.
Thank you so much for that. Ms. Brown, Ms. Hunter, do y'all have anything to add?
No, I agree. I think it's about relationships can change, right, over time. Miss Corbin, and I think Miss Brown was speaking to this earlier. Like, just because someone is a good fit initially may not mean that they are a good fit later on, because we all change and we all evolve. And I think constantly kind of reassessing that is important, and picking up on, you know, the cues, right, that may be out there in that space. And I think it's okay for you to step away, right, if you need to. That being said, though, you know, I will also say I have had mentors who I have not, or I had not spoken to in years, simply because, you know, time had passed, maybe they had moved on to a different job or whatever it was. And I still would reach out to them, and it was as if, you know, nothing had changed. So I think it's really about, again, understanding the dynamics of the relationship that you have, and kind of the dynamics of what's going on with each individual person. And sometimes just taking that shot of just putting something out there. And it can start simple with, hello, hey, I was just thinking about you. You were on my mind. How are things going? And see where it goes from there, in terms of how receptive they are. And I think you'll know whether or not it's something that you want to consider. So some relationships are meant to be, you know, lifelong and long term. Some are just meant to be for a season. And mentors and mentorship is very similar.
Thank you so much. We have one final question from Michelle, and then we're going to circle back to closing nuggets, and I'll turn it back over to Ms. Danielle and Dr. Poe. Michelle says, are there any pressures in maintaining the expectations others may have of you in terms of being leaders within your workplace? And if there are pressures and expectations of you as a leader, how do you deal with those? I think this is something a lot of student leaders have questions about. Being a student leader here at Delaware State University and knowing a lot of other student leaders, it's certainly something I've had questions about at points in time. And so I know I and Michelle would love if you all could elaborate on that a little.
I think for me, I've had just personal challenges with what the traditional definition is of like professionalism. And I think that that word and term and definition oftentimes is rooted in white supremacy based characteristics. And I think a lot of times when I don't lean into those, I may get some sort of like negative pushback because of my identity of being a Black woman. So I think one of the challenges that I've had is not ignoring that, but being able to still like rise above what those definitions of professionalism is. Like, you know, I'm going to show up to a meeting and I'm going to wear my hoop earrings, and like that's just, it's going to be what it's going to be, right? I may listen to certain music, or I may have certain vernacular or language within the way that I lead, but I'm not going to minimize who I am, and that doesn't minimize the work that I'm going to produce. So I think just showing up who I am authentically is what I personally try to do as a leader and as a manager within my own personal role. But I do think that that does have its own challenges, but that's just something that I think, unfortunately, is coming from like within the society that we're in here in America. But I think just like standing true to who I am.
Yeah, I would say the same. I think being a leader, in particular in a space where there are not a lot of leaders that look like you. So, you know, and I know this happens in all industries, but I'll speak for, again, like IT. Like there are not, it is a white male dominated field. There are not a lot of Black leaders, or certainly not to the extent that there need to be or there should be. And so I'm often, you know, not only the only woman that is in the room, or the only Black person that is in the room, but I'm the only Black woman that is in the room, which has its own level of nuance. And so I, I wouldn't say that that is pressure, but that it does sometimes feel, you will experience at moments like there's a little bit of a target or a spotlight, right? That is there as a result, right? Um, Microaggressions or things like that, right? That are happening, you know, in the moment. What I have learned over my time and my years is to embrace it, and that's going to sound really, really strange, but I embrace it from the perspective of that I have a seat at the table and I have a voice at the table. And I am very passionate about DE&I and pushing up against our agenda and pushing up against the norm and asking and challenging and asking the right questions in that way. And so I use that voice and that platform that I have to do just that. And that may at times make people uncomfortable with me, and uncomfortable with the conversation and uncomfortable with that push. But when we talk about purpose, I see that as my purpose, right? I see that I'm here for a reason and I have an opportunity to leverage it to make a difference. And so that is what I'm going to do. So it goes back to being authentic and understanding who you are. And when you have that opportunity to push up against some of those pressures that you may experience, to use it as a moment, right, to to make change, right, and to affect change or to challenge change. And so that's how I kind of look at it. But you have to embrace it. You have to be okay with being who you are. You have to know that you are there at that table for a reason, and you have to be unwavering in your belief in yourself that you are just as, if not more, capable than everyone else that is at the table as well.
And I'll
So
just
much.
I'll just lastly add that, I mean, at the end of the day, the only person who really has to be able to live with what you do is you. So I would say that you need to have like a certain confidence and belief in yourself. And as long as you know that the way that you're leading and you're interacting with people it makes you feel good about yourself and you know that you're doing the right thing, then that's what you need to do. And going back to the point that we made earlier about a mentor being an advocate, if you think that there's something that needs to change, perhaps you notice like some issues or some problems, you should be confident to advocate. That's what I do as a leader. If I see that there's an issue with my team, perhaps there's something that they need, I advocate for that with the upper echelon of our corporate management. And at times things have changed because of what I've advocated for. A lawyer is being an advocate, but I implement that not just for my clients, but also for myself and for my team. And I think that goes back to the point that, relationships are all about people. Business is about people. And I think that if we can use mentorship as a way to create these personal connections with the people that we work with, I think that really can help the business as a whole, and your development as a whole, because that's a way that we get employee retention, people less likely to leave. And I think it can really help everyone as a whole. But I would, again, focus on whatever makes you feel comfortable, then that's the right thing for you.
Thank you all so much. And with that, we're going to wrap it up and turn it back over to Ms. Craig. Thank you all so much again for taking the time out today. Can we just get a quick round of applause for our amazing panelists and for all the knowledge they've given us today? Thank you all so much. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Ms. Danielle. Thank you all for letting me moderate today, and have a great day.
Thank you all. Thank you, Kennedy, for being an amazing moderator, and for our panelists who joined and gave, of yourself to our students and to our faculty and staff. It is so appreciated. We definitely welcome you back to DSU in the future as we do more programming. So thank you so much for your insight that you were able to give to us today. It was an amazing discussion, and I took some notes. Okay, I took some notes because we're always learning at different levels, but we're always learning. So for those of my students who are still on this session, you know what time it is. It is the time for Wheel of Names. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And your name was added. Hold on, you guys see? Do you see it?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Your names were added if you signed into the session in the chat. If you didn't, that means you weren't listening to me or looking at the chat, and so you missed out on the gift card. So I have two today because I'm feeling, kind of nice. Oh, I'm blurred. There you go. Yeah. Anyway, we're gonna go ahead and see who wins. Whoever wins the gift cards, they are $25 Grubhub gift cards. You're gonna stop by the library tomorrow and pick them up, or before you leave this week. So Alexandra, that's one of my students. Thank you so much. You actually asked a question, I believe. So thank you for asking your question and being involved and sharing or getting the answers that you needed from our amazing panelists today. And we have one more. And Zori, I believe Zori is a senior and she's graduating this fall. So congratulations to you, Zori. Make sure that you stop by the URELAH offices. If I'm not in my office, I will leave it with Ms. Terry, Paul Smith. You can come and pick it up. Thank you all for joining us today. Please make sure that you complete the survey that I posted in the chat. That is how you will, that's how I will know you are here. If it's not showing up anywhere, I'm going to post it one more time. And Dr. Poe, I will leave it to you for final comments.
Thank you so very much, Ms. Craig. I really appreciate you putting together an amazing leadership development series. Once again, top notch. I really do appreciate that. We just want to say also thank you to Ms. Kennedy Patterson for always taking the lead to lead our leadership development sessions. We know that Ms. Patterson is a true leader and it doesn't stop here. We just also want to acknowledge Mrs. Terry Paul Smith. She's the program assistant for the Office of URELAH. She's waving hello. And so we want to say thank you a million times to Ms. Brown, Ms. Corbin, Ms. Hunter, and the absence of Mr. Belcher as well. We truly appreciate you taking the time out of today to be able to share your information with our DSU scholars. Your experiences have said it all, and we are grabbing those golden nuggets and that we'll be able to move forward. And so you've put a lot of students' mind at ease for being able to share your experiences when it comes to mentorship, coaching, and consulting. So as you're passing it on to us, I'm sure our students will have an opportunity to pass it on and pay it forward. So again, we say thank you so very much from the bottom of our hearts here at the Hornet Nation. We just want to say, now that you're on, you're part of our Hornet family for always. And so we want to be able to invite you to come back in the future as well. So thank you so much. Have a great Christmas and New Year's break for all of our students. Best regards to your finals. We're so proud of you. Make sure you finish strong because you started strong and because you all matter. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great day.
Bye.
Stay safe and be well. Bye.